Hey, my name's Sam, so good to see you. Welcome to part 3 of our podcast, Let's Talk Relationships. Hey, if you missed the other ones, part 1 and part 2, why don't you go back and check them out first? Why is there such an emphasis on Christian couples to get married? Let's drop my laptop there. Why is there such an emphasis for Christian couples to get married?
Because marriage is amazing. It's a great thing to do.
Really?
It's great to make that commitment to one another. As you've said already, it's a covenant relationship. It's it's a declaration of your love and commitment to each other with God. It's a legally binding thing as well. I underestimated the power of that, I think, when we got married. I was, it's pretty serious, isn't it? I'm still okay with it.
Just okay.
But yeah, I think it's a really important. It's the context for starting a family. It's security. It's so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the one of the covenants that actually kind of endures throughout the Bible. What we mean by a covenant relationship is that it's an agreement that is made in front of God. It's actually, that you commit, you promise yourself one to another in the sight of God, and actually there's a weight to that, and there's a significance to that, and I think that's the context within which God says that a man and a woman can have a healthy relationship, a healthy intimate relationship, a healthy sexual relationship, as you say, in which they raise a family, and also marriage is the picture that the New Testament writers, that Paul uses for the church and its interaction with Jesus. That actually the church is described as the bride of Christ. So actually marriage is meant to show people what the relationship is like between Jesus and his church, which is also really significant.
Yeah. We've got a great question. Is arguing normal?
Yes. No. Yeah.
Yes. No. I don't.
Yes, I think so. Well, it depends. The answer. Like, we have disagreements. I think sometimes people use we had an argument as maybe like this is not the right relationship or whatever.
Right.
But it's okay. It's better to have a good open discussion about something you disagree with and come hash it out and come to a mutually agreed conclusion, than to hide your feelings away from one another and try and second guess each other.
And I think conflict always has a negative connotation, right? And you just mentioned people often use argument as this relationship isn't right, but actually there are ways that conflict can make something better, or like a relationship or a decision or whatever that it is that you're discussing. Actually, argument can be a tool for you to both come out of it with a better idea of where you're going, or a better idea of what it is that you want to do, or the way that you're thinking about a certain thing in your relationship. So I think that conflict can be really helpful if it's, as you said, if it's done in the right way.
Yeah. Exactly. I think it's about the way you communicate and sort of how those disagreements take place and what the end of that is. Like, do you go away just both feeling angry still when there's no sort of end to that? How do you treat each other in that sort of disagreement, in that conflict? I think that's something we talked a lot about in marriage prep. We went through a lot of things about in terms of how you communicate, conflict resolution. It's all really important things. It's just the way you go about it is quite key.
Yeah, and if there's any kind of verbal or physical aggression involved, that's not okay. You have to. There's always got to be respect. Mutual respect at the centre of it, and I think it's healthy to be able to disagree openly, but to be shouting at one another is not healthy. It's not helpful for anyone involved. So being able to kind of talk openly and calmly about things that you disagree with one another, to be able to work through it is really important, because you see it so much where people don't, like they'll try and or they'll talk to someone else about it. Like, no, you need to work these things out together.
I always feel like if there's a relationship where they say we never have a disagreement, chances are, I heard, it was Owen McManus I heard talk about this, who said it feels like actually one of those people is probably feeling unfulfilled in that relationship because they don't have an opportunity to put their point across. We talked earlier about how Paul writes about, wives submit to your husbands, husbands love your wives as Christ loves the church. It feels to me like Paul's anticipating that there's going to be some times that you're going to have to work stuff through, because he's setting the boundaries within which you will do that. But I think also you don't want a relationship that's defined by conflict. And I think that's also what Hels is saying. I know when we were preparing this, when we said we were going to do the relationships, John, who's one of the leaders in the life of our church, runs a charity, runs an organisation that works with people who are victims of and perpetrators of domestic abuse. And actually, you don't want a relationship which is defined by conflict. You don't want a relationship where there's control or coercion, where there's violence or the threat of violence, but also where there's emotional manipulation. And some of the things we've talked about are aspects of how you avoid that in a relationship, good boundaries, being emotionally healthy, not being reliant on people, not having someone that's domineering in the relationship. All of these are things, making sure the relationship's set in the context of other good relationships with peers. All those things are healthy for that. So I think that, yes, some disagreement is healthy. It's how you manage that conflict, and obviously you don't want it to step across the line to where there's physical or emotional abuse.
We've got a question that says, why do guys like older girls? I just don't get it.
I don't even know that's a thing.
Yeah,
well, I suppose obviously some guys do like older girls.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's like a normal trend. Like the typical thing from a kind of brain development and maturity development side of things is actually girls tend to go for older guys because girls mature faster in a kind of neurodevelopmental way. But sure, if guys like older girls, alright.
I think really it's just a stage of life thing. It's probably what really, I think that's what we've been talking about a bit. I don't know if we need to go into lots of detail about it, but I think people are at a similar stage of life, similar goals. And you have to remember that with girls there is a kind of biological imperative on some relationships that isn't there for guys. Guys can father children up until they're,
any age.
Whatever age. Actually, girls, there is a cycle that has a certain course to run on these things that maybe influences things. But that's a conversation being house to have another time when there aren't cameras watching.
Next!
What should you do if you're trying to get someone's attention, but you feel like you're just an option for them?
Don't worry about it. Just leave them. You're better than that. Yeah. If you're trying to get their attention and you think that they might, if the only reason they choose you is because they've got lots of options or you're not the best option, you don't need it. You're better than that.
Yeah, and if you step back and stop showing an interest in them, you might be surprised by how quickly they take an interest in you. And if not,
and then who's
to
to say if you do finally get their attention that they're not still then looking for other options?
Yeah, and I think what Hal said earlier is really good actually, that that sense of trying to get their attention. I don't know whether you want to spend your life trying to get someone's attention. I think that what you said was about this idea that actually if you're focused on where you're going, you're running your race, actually especially, again, to put it in a Christian context, that Paul writes about running your race to get the prize, focused on Jesus, focused on the purpose that he has for your life, and you will look to your side and realise there's someone looking alongside you. And I thought that was such a cliche. I heard that so many times and I thought that's complete tosh. What a load of rubbish. That isn't how it works out. And I ended up and that's the place I found myself in. And actually, Helena showed interest in someone else, and all of a sudden I was like, oh crap, like I have royally stuffed this up. So actually, for guys, we need to be reflective. Actually, sometimes we do need to be prepared. I was very focused forwards. Sometimes you do need to have a look at whether there's someone running next to you, Sam. But also, I don't think you want to be going around looking for people's attention. Actually, you don't need to find your love, your value, and your worth in a guy or a girl. And I would encourage you, I think that all of that, the whole of the Bible is the story of, actually God's interest in people. And undoubtedly God loves you and he values you and he has purpose and meaning for your life. And actually that's a great place to start and end the conversation about your worth. And then you're kind of a lot more free and liberated when it comes to relationships.
So good.
Live your life.
All right. We're going to come on to the fun section. Excellent. The fun section you've all been waiting for. Sex. Whoa! We said it. All right. We've got a few questions. Just as a a comment. We did say that no questions are off limits, and you guys really challenged that. So you really went for it. But yeah, we're gonna start with some and get crazier as we go on.
Cool.
Like that. Cool. All right. Let's start with this one. What is the lowest amount of intimacy you allowed in a relationship? And I think we've talked a little bit about this already, but let's just cover it again.
Yeah, and I presume that's not a how little can I get away with showing love and affection towards my spouse?
Yeah,
it's
I think it's
what's the minimum? Where's the line?
Yeah.
In terms of okay, if
how
there's
far,
no sex before marriage,
how far can I go?
How far is too far?
What,
Yeah.
Yes.
How far is too far?
Yeah.
Which should we be asking that question is always the thing
Yeah.
that people say, isn't it? If you're already thinking that, then you're sort of
Maybe it's too
in
far.
in the wrong place.
Yeah, I personally, I think Phil, you outlined this really well earlier. Like, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, your hormones and natural reaction will be wanting to take you to have sex.
Yeah.
So you have to rein it in if that's not what you want to do. And putting some good boundaries in place, and that will be different for different people, you know. If it triggers you just through kissing, then you have to put some boundaries in that. But I think anything in terms of how far is too far, anything that has the word sex in it, if you're not wanting to have sex before marriage, that's sex. Like if it's involving the organs you use in order to have sex.
So
then
oral
it's
sex is sex.
Yeah.
And I think, it's, as I say, it's natural to move towards that place. I know Hels and I had to have a conversation because we were getting a bit touchy-feely when we were going out. Let's be honest, let's just put it out there. And we had to take a step back because we were a little bit too keen on kissing and,
Well, those are the days,
It's okay, I mean, what can I say? What can I say? She couldn't keep my hands off me, but I was, if you've heard one of her recent messages, differently skinny back then. But, I think the other thing is, why does it matter? Why do we associate, sex and marriage? Why do Christians believe that, sex should be enjoyed within marriage? And actually, we talked about earlier how marriage is a covenant relationship, right? It's about making a promise to each other that you will only have a relationship with each other, and that creates a safe space for that level of intimacy, because sex is amazing. Sex is this wonderful thing where two become one. There is an interaction that is not just about a physical interaction, but actually is about a soulful coming together, a spiritual coming together, an emotional coming together. And I know that may not be a fashionable view maybe in this day and age, but actually you look at the harm that is caused by sex. You look at how we treat sex crime, and you'll see that we place a different value on it, and it's because it affects people differently. So actually you can't really get away from that, I don't think. And actually God wants us to enjoy that, but he wants us to enjoy it in a safe environment. And we've made safe sex about not getting an infection and about not getting pregnant, but actually safe sex is about two people remaining emotionally healthy in the midst of their most intimate moments. That's what it's about, and that's kind of why it matters. And I say that in the how far is too far question, because actually if you're approaching that level of intimacy, you're crossing lines in terms of intimacy. It's going to hurt you. It's going to cause all sorts of feelings that you don't want: guilt, shame. If it's not causing them in you, it's probably causing them in the other person, and it's taking you to a place where it ceases to be emotionally healthy, and that's God's best for you. Right at the beginning in Genesis, it talks about how Adam and Eve were naked and they knew no shame. And actually, that's where God wants to get you to, is to a place where you can be naked in front of another person, not experience a sense of guilt and shame, but fully enjoy your relationship with each other. And in order to do that, he says, wait until you've made an agreement where you both say, I commit myself fully to you, and then go for it. Have a great time.
And it's amazing, I think, how uncomplicated it keeps things as well. Like if we keep sex just for marriage, actually that the lead up to that in terms of all the questions we covered, like how do you know it's the right person, how do actually if you take sex out of it, that takes out a lot of physical feelings and emotions, and I think, again, it might be a bit traditional to say, but I think it's true. There's a bond there that you cannot get away from. It creates an intimacy in a relationship that might be too forced. If you're having sex early on, like I've got plenty of friends who one in particular who was going out with a few different people at once and was getting herself really confused about who's the right person for me. I'm like, well, maybe stop sleeping with all of them, and that might make the decision a bit easier. Like, it's true, right?
Yeah.
So I think it keeps things a lot more straightforward.
Yeah.
And actually, if the world followed this one best thing that God has for us, if the world obeyed God in this one recommendation, we would have no prostitution, no human trafficking, no rape, no any kind of sex crime, no STIs, no unwanted
probably
pregnancies,
no HIV/AIDS epidemic.
like.
Yeah.
And that's not to condemn anyone that's had sex outside of marriage. We're talking like this is God's best for you. If that's not what you've lived so far, like this is why we have grace and we have a new start. It doesn't mean you can't start from this point onwards. Like when you come into connection with Jesus, salvation is the old has gone, the new has come.
Yeah.
And you can be from this point onwards can live your best life with Jesus and start from this point. And there's plenty of people that have been in that situation.
Yeah. So many people have been in that situation. Actually, but you can, as you say, in a new creation, you can make a fresh start. Today can be your day to decide that you're going to do things differently.
We've got a really good question that comes up, I guess flows really nicely off the back of this. Is if I have sex with someone I'm not married to, but will get married to, is it still a sin?
Well, I mean, technically, sex is marriage. Like if you look at in terms of the Old Testament and what the marriage ceremony is all about, sex was involved in the marriage ceremony. So in the eyes of God, sex is marriage, but you're not married yet. Like in terms of you haven't stood up in front of all of your friends and God in a church and said, I commit my life to this person. You haven't paid all that money. You haven't, so I think there is a real value in making that commitment first, because actually you're not married yet. Like,
well, and I think the question was, is that a sin? Actually, what does sin mean? Sin is missing the mark. So sin is coming up short on God's best for your life. And is God's best for your life that you would have that level of intimacy before you've made a promise to each other that you will be faithful to each other? No, that isn't God's best for you. So just based on the pure definition, that is sin because it isn't God's best for you. And really the question is, if you're going to marry that person, why not wait? Why not wait until you are married? And if you're like, well, it's a long time to our wedding, then why not move the date of your wedding? Because if it matters that much to you, just get married earlier. Make that commitment. And if you want to get married earlier, make that commitment and then have the big do later because you booked the venue. I mean, you go ahead, right? But actually, really, it's about, what is the best is to have that's the safety of that relationship. And you don't have to have sex before you get married. And it being, as we said, engagements break up. Sometimes in engagement you realise marriage is not right. You don't want to get to that point. You don't want to complicate that point by engaging in a sexual relationship, rushing into a sexual relationship. Because look, there's points down the line for your marriage when sex is not going to be as much of a drive for you. When your hormones will have calmed down, when you are, further on in life, it isn't going to be that it's all about how much sex you can have. And you don't want that to be the one thing that defines your relationship.
I think there's an element about honouring the other person as well and respecting them. Like, to say, like, this is the boundary that we're both going to keep to because we respect each other and this is both what we really want. And to compromise on that maybe sets you up to compromise in other ways later on in marriage.
Awesome. All right, got another question here related to marriage, sex and marriage as well. I might paraphrase this one. If I have sex with someone that I've divorced, is it still wrong? I guess if you once married, and you go back into a relationship and then end up having sex, is that right? Is that sin again?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably not going to be healthy.
Because
at the end of the day, you made that commitment to each other, you decided that it wasn't a good idea to continue that commitment, you broke off that commitment and then you're saying, well, I'm going to go back to it. Well, why are you going back to it, I guess, is the question. If you're going back to it for sexual gratification, I mean, look, no one's judging you for that, but actually, is that the framework within which this that's healthily meant to happen? It's probably hard to argue that it is, isn't it, really? And I think, again, look, I mean, divorce is a whole other topic, and it's a significant thing when it comes to relationships. And I think, God's best for people is that marriage continues. There are plenty of reasons why divorce happens, and I don't think anyone who's been divorced takes that decision lightly. Yeah. And it is, a really significant and a really painful thing. And, without having kind of direct lived experience myself, it's probably hard for me to comment properly with the full kind of emotional weight of that situation. But, I think once you've decided, look, this isn't working out for us as a relationship, having sex is probably just going to complicate things, isn't it? It's going to raise up all sorts of issues about, and hey, well, you might be like, hey, but the relationship's back on track, it's going really well, we want to get married again. Okay, we'll get married again. Yeah. And then again, place that relationship in the context of that healthy promise, that healthy commitment to one another.
All right, 2 questions that I'm going to pair together. Is anal a sin, even in marriage? Is oral sex during marriage fine? Thanks for those questions.
I feel like we've answered a lot, so...
Within the context of marriage, as we've talked about, sex, anything that defines sex within the context of marriage is fine. Yeah. So if that is your preference,
as long as you're both consenting
adults and you're married, anal sex, oral sex, yeah.
Yeah. Medically, there are risks associated with that.
Is that really
It's a good job we've got some doctors on the panel.
It's true though.
I suppose it could be for anal sex,
So, but going forward, medically speaking, there are some risks involved with anal sex.
Yeah, it has a slightly higher risk of, if we get really medical, of perforating your sigmoid colon. That's potential, which is not good. I mean, it's not a major, like, if you have anal sex, that's going to happen or anything. Yeah. But, I just think, why not regular sex?
Awesome. So we've talked so far about the friend zone, about dating, about sex, and now we're going to talk about navigating relationships. First question I'm going to ask us is how to navigate interracial relationships in the modern world.
Why did you ask us?
I
don't know why.
We can.
Yes, so how do you navigate?
You go.
Yeah.
I think
where do you start?
This is such a huge topic, and we actually wanted to do a whole podcast on, let's talk race, and that will come a little bit further down the line, but we just want to maybe talk a little bit about this. I guess, before we got married, when we were engaged, we did marriage prep, and we talked about the differences and the challenges maybe that we would encounter with our different backgrounds, our different upbringings, culture, family as well. I think that first and foremost, it's just being aware. Yeah. Especially for us, because we're from 2 completely different cultures. Even within my family, there's different cultures and different backgrounds within that. So there's layers upon layers. But it's being aware that there are different cultures and different ways of doing things, and things that are important in different ways for both.
Yeah, I think a part of that process was us having very open and honest conversations about what that meant in terms of my culture, ethnicity, my upbringing, my family, what certain things meant within our culture, how our engagement process was going to be, what our wedding was going to be like, how I was brought up by my family, and just being able to talk about that and understand where we're both coming from,
Yeah.
and then from that, obviously, the level of respect that needs to be there once you sort of have that awareness and understanding of each other's cultures is really important. And I think neither of us shy away from that conversation or shy away from our culture because it's who we are, and it'd be weird to not talk about that or not acknowledge it. So I think those are really key things for us, was obviously being aware, talking about it, understanding, having that level of respect, being open and honest, and that just
And I think that this understanding, you know, I guess the person who asked this question might be in an interracial relationship or thinking about one. I think it's important to understand that you're constantly learning. Like,
definitely.
For us, it's constantly being on that journey of, and being really, really honest with yourself. Like, I don't understand all these things about your culture or the way that you do things, and you don't understand all of the things that I was brought up with and the way that I do things. So it's communication is key, but also being honest with yourself and open and ready for a journey to learn.
Definitely, yeah. We'll talk about it more later.
Yeah, but keep posted.
Yeah.
Let's talk race coming soon. Oh, it's a long one. I have to bring it right up. I need my spectacles. Gosh, I need my glasses back. I'm new to relationships as a Christian, and I've always wanted to keep my male friends as friends, but recently I kind of felt different towards one guy in particular. I don't want to ruin the relationship we already have though. Sorry, I've run out of space. So what would be the best way to go about it? I don't want to ruin the relationship we have though, so what would be the best way to go about it?
I think we probably already talked quite a lot about how to move forward on this. I think, you know, spending time together in a social group is a good thing. I think having, you know, good people around you. I think if you're a newer Christian, you want to make sure that you've got a good understanding of, you know, actually what's Christianity all about really, and some of the kind of key foundational elements of that. You might want to do some specific reading. There are all sorts of resources out there available that you can get hold of. You know, Bible reading plans you can do. There's people who will help you to navigate that as well. Get some more mature Christians, people who've done a bit more of the journey, not necessarily older, but maybe just people with a bit more wisdom. Maybe some people who are in a relationship or are married who can speak some wisdom into your life and actually draw on that kind of guidance to understand a bit more about what it means as a Christian to navigate and move forward on that.
Cool. Very good. Next question is, I struggle to be open with my partner because of past trauma. How do I become more open? Oh, that's a deep one.
Yeah. I think my first instinct is to say, like, it's okay just to say that to your partner.
Yeah.
To say, like, I really struggle to be open, and it's not you, it's the fact that I've got a previous trauma, and so if at the moment it's, so bear with me in that, and in time, but I want to work on it together, then I think at the very least do that, because otherwise if you just keep yourself closed off, they're going to presume that, you know, that you're just not that into them, or you're not willing to talk about things, or you know, they're going to start trying to work out what's going on.
I think if you want to know how safe it is as an environment to raise those things, I think if you initially raise that as, look, I'm struggling to be open because I've had bad experience in the past, you don't need to say more than that, and actually you'll see how that person reacts to that. You know, that might be something that they already have an inkling of, or some kind of awareness of, and they're committed to the relationship even in the context of that. There are others who might freak out and run a mile, and you might think that actually that's not helpful. It probably depends a bit where you are in the relationship. Like if you're married, then you know the resources you invest in resolving that and moving forward may be more significant than if you've just started dating and you're still feeling things out. Not necessarily, but most likely. You know, I certainly, as a professional, wouldn't rule out the idea of actually looking for some professional help around that to help you to navigate it. And you'll find that there are counsellors who can help you to navigate it for you as an individual first, and then actually bringing in the other party and helping them to navigate it together. And that might be what's required to create a safe space for you to explore it. And look, there are great couples in the life of church who can help, but at the end of the day, none of them are professional marriage counsellors, and you might need a professional relationship counsellor to help create a safe space for you to explore those issues.
I really like this next question. How do you manage time with God and a relationship at the same time? How do you manage time with God and a relationship at the same time? Because I think, just from experience and observation, sometimes, we have this phrase in church of heart and soul until, right? And it's talking about people who are heart and soul fully committed to building church and involved in teams, and then suddenly they get a girlfriend or boyfriend, and just like that they're gone. And that consumes their whole life. So I think this is really great question. How do you stop that if you are really passionate about church and you want to keep doing that and also have a relationship? What are the keys to maintaining both, I suppose?
Well, I think any relationship between two Christians, well, I presume because of the way the question's asked, that person does believe in God. Actually, it has God at the centre. And so together, like praying together is important, and making sure that you are encouraging each other in your faith is important. But actually, I think single or in a relationship, making time for God daily is a non-negotiable. I think that's just the way to a healthy life and relationship with God, and becoming more and more like Jesus every day, which should be our aim, is just spend time with God daily. And for me, I think the morning is a great place to start, because usually by my day starts and I get distracted. So having time of a morning, like in a good kind of habit with that, is really important.
Really like what you said about praying together. It's something Esther and I have just started doing regularly. Just before work and stuff, we just make sure that we pray together and start our day with, God as the focus. Because it's so easy in the busyness and the hecticness of life, right? For that to be the first thing that goes. And,
I think it makes your relationship stronger when you do it as well. Like
Definitely.
It's good. It's really good.
I mean, I think recognizing that these things are dynamic as well. I think that if you find, one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got, balancing your relationship with God with a relationship with someone else, a relationship with God with work, balancing your relationship with God with work, or studies, or whatever it is that looks like, is balance. But actually, that balance is not a fixed point. Balance is a point that you pass through rather than somewhere that you stay. And actually, if you think of a pendulum, it has a point of balance, and the point of balance is kind of in the middle, but it's in a constant state. And really, the best what you're trying to do is not keep it without moving, because you don't want a life that's not moving, but actually you want it to be just that you make sure the extremes aren't too extreme. And I know that in work and church life is that there are times when I've got to put more into church. Like sometimes people say they feel stressed in the run up to our Christmas concert, and I'm like, well, you should do, because it's the biggest thing we do all year, so you should feel stressed then. But equally, there are times when work takes more attention. But actually, it's about trying to make sure that you keep going between 2 points really, and it doesn't get too extreme. I think the regularity and the habit of going to God on a daily basis is really important. And if that starts to be jeopardized by your relationship, especially early on, that's a real red flag for how that's going to pan out. But in terms of how you balance those things, I think it's okay if there are times when it's you're able to invest more in one than in the other, but it's trying not to let it become skewed that way or the other way, but actually that you keep the sense of dynamic and the sense of Jesus talks about the unforced rhythms of grace, and actually life should have a rhythm to it. And it's not, that doesn't mean that life's all the same. It means that life is dynamic and it's in motion and movement, really.
Good.
After coming out of a relationship, how do you move on without letting your previous experiences affect your future?
I mean, I think there's an implication in that you shouldn't let your previous experiences influence your future, and actually probably are lessons that you can learn from that relationship and move on and be stronger, and that's okay. Because you might be like, well, the reason the relationship didn't work out is because they weren't in the same place in life where I was, or we didn't share the same values, or there's things that you might be like, oh, I don't want to repeat those mistakes again. So actually, take a bit of time, look back, learn the lessons, and then move on. Yeah. Because actually, what is the thing that people are always concerned about with relationships is like, well, getting into another relationship on the rebound. And really that's about saying, I'm going to intentionally not learn from the past and dive into something else to forget about it. Yeah. But actually, you're better off saying, well, let me take stock from why that didn't work out. And then I'll take the things that I need to work on forward. I'll have a conversation with someone else to say, am I overthinking these? Is this my problem? Was it their problem? And I think like move forward from there really is the first thing I'd say.
I think it's something you just said, to take some time. I think that's really helpful. Yeah. Just to talk about growing pains, right? Yeah. There is pain in growing sometimes, but taking that time to reflect and think about the things that, is there something that I can work on for the future. I also really like, you mentioned earlier on, Phil, you talked about not calling people like my ex, right? And like holding on to the past. I think there's so much opportunity to do that. Yeah. So easy to do that, right?
Yeah. Look, sometimes people think, well, does that mean I need to find a new church, whatever, all that stuff. Like, you don't have to change church. Church is big enough that you can get in. Look, plenty of people have got plenty of people that they used to go out with. And what's really healthy about the fact is that because we don't talk about them as my ex or my this or my that, actually, because it liberates those to be relationships when those who are, if we said, the further down the line, there's not even any residual history with that stuff. And look, it's always more painful closer to the event, and it will get easier over time. So time is really a great healer. And I think what's helpful, take the lessons and then just let the rest, pass into the mist of time.
Cool. I love this next question because this person is clearly thinking about their budgets. Holly Mid would be proud.
Yeah.
But this question says, on a weekly basis, what is the amount you should expect to spend on your partner?
I don't think I've ever considered it on a weekly basis.
Yeah. So I think this is really gender based actually, and I think the amount you spend is based on how many X chromosomes you have. You spend therefore those who have 2 X chromosomes should spend twice as much as those who only have 1.
Right, yeah. That's a load of rubbish.
As you started that answer, I genuinely thought you were serious.
Was legit. Yeah.
I don't think we could answer that question.
Let's look at the positives. Have a budget. And work out what you can spend on fun stuff like going on dates. Great, but that will be very much dependent on your income.
Yeah, and the marriage vows are for richer, for poorer. Yeah. So actually, you want a relationship that isn't based on how much you can spend week to week. It's great to be thinking about it. Good on you for thinking about it. We said we'll do a Let's Talk race. We'll do a Let's Talk money as well because actually those are really important things. We'll talk more about it then. Great that you're thinking about it, but try not to define your relationship by that.
Maybe can I phrase the question slightly differently, because I think this is something that I thought about a lot when we were first dating. I guess along the put it into a dating context, how much should you be, I guess, financially bringing to the table, do you know what I mean? Obviously if one person drives and the other person doesn't, should you be sharing petrol costs or maybe that kind of thing? Or
and again, it depends though as well. When we started going out, I was a student and you were working, so you did pay for stuff.
And now Helena's a GP and I'm not.
So I pay for stuff.
For richer, for poorer.
I think it depends, and the seasons, it changes.
I mean, the times we've run into trouble with it are the times when we haven't talked about it, or when I haven't been open about that area. I think that those have been the times when money's been a challenge. So talking about it, being open about it is going to be helpful. Not feeling like you have to spend the earth on someone is a good idea. If I can be really left field about this, from a church perspective, I think this is actually what's so good about the idea of tithing, which seems like a weird thing to say, but for those who don't know, tithing is about giving the first 10% of your income back to God. And that really helps me because it helps me to set the rest of my finances in context. What does that 10% look like? So what does the rest of my expenditure look like? And actually, you might not be in a position to tithe because you might not be earning money, but maybe if you've got something that you're giving to, if you're, in a church context, if you're giving to church, that provides you with a helpful framework for, well, how am I spending on this person compared with something else? And I think that really helps as a kind of benchmark figure.
That's really good. Never thought about it that way before. Yeah. So we're just coming on to the last group of questions. We've just got a couple here. I'm going to read them both out, if that's all right. The first one is, how do I get rid of my homosexual feelings? And the second is, how do I approach homosexuality and other sexualities from a modern and Christian perspective?
Wow, yeah, it's a big topic to talk about, really. And I think when talking about homosexuality and the church is notorious, or Christians are notorious for, I think, handling this topic very badly. But then there is a tendency to have like a line on it, like a blanket, this is right, this is wrong, and actually, we're people, we're all individual, unique beings, and so it's always a conversation, I think, as individuals. And to the person who asked, how do I deal with or get rid of homosexual feelings, like, wow, I personally, I couldn't tell you the answer to that because I've never experienced that kind of thing before. But the one thing I always would recommend is to focus, rather than focusing on maybe changing your behaviour or changing your feelings, pursue a relationship with Jesus and work it out with him about what those feelings mean or what's going on. Like, no one can tell you what's right or wrong or what to feel or what not to feel. But Jesus and a relationship with him is the thing that you should be focusing on for sure. Look at who you are in Christ and your value in him, and see what happens as a result of that. And a really practical resource would be listening to or seeking out a guy called Cy Rogers, who has been on that journey and has lived experience of being a homosexual man and then not being anymore. He never says that his journey is whatever applies to everyone, but he speaks really open and honestly about it, and maybe that might help in some kind of way, using the language of getting rid of the feelings. If that's something that's an unpleasant feeling for you and you want to work through it, then let's first and foremost a relationship with Jesus, and then, as I say, the really practical resource, Cy Rogers, is great.
Yeah, I think, as you say, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
And I think, actually, and I think I fully endorse what you're saying about being well informed about that. And I think, we can give an answer on a podcast. And there's a danger that we give an answer that would seem to promote a particular line that is not necessarily going to be helpful for people, but also doesn't give enough of the picture really to answer this. And this is one of the fundamental questions of our age, and as those of us that are Christians are going to be asked about this, and we actually owe it to our world to have an understanding of what we think. And one of the best things that we can do is actually go and look at what the Bible says about this and seek out some resources about it to better understand how our perspective on that ourselves. I think that, if there's one thing that I would want to say to the homosexual community, from a Christian perspective, it would be sorry. Sorry we've made it seem like your sexuality is a barrier to you coming to Jesus, because it isn't, and it shouldn't be. I had a conversation with a colleague who said, how can I come to your church, Phil, because you people hate me? And this wasn't someone who hadn't had any contact with Christians. This is someone who'd had lots of contact with Christians, who'd been raised in a Christian context, in a Christian school, who had come to the conclusion that God and Christians hated him based on his sexuality. And I would much rather start from a starting place that says, that is not how God feels about you. That as a person, God loves you. And the rest of these things are much better worked out in a relationship with Jesus. They're not things you have to work out before you come to a relationship with Jesus. And yet there are conversations to be had, and there's things to be worked out, and there's hard truths in the Bible for all of us. And the stuff that we all have to work out. I think in the church we've placed far too much emphasis on homosexuality. But equally, I understand for those outside the church why this is the big deal that makes you ask, because you're living it yourself, or because you want to understand how it fits in a 21st century context. that this is the big deal that prevents you from exploring Christianity further. Well, what I would say is let's open the conversation, let's enter into the dialogue, let's both outline where we're coming from, and let's engage with this instead of either side dismissing the other on these lines, really.
Yeah, I agree. Take home message is always God loves you regardless. And we as Christians have, traditionally thought it was our position to judge, and for some reason we have judged homosexuality as something more significant than others, and that's not okay. And Jesus loves everyone, no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are those who will say, well, that will criticise us for taking that stance and, putting that stance out there publicly. Well, let's come and have a conversation with us, because if you're, in the church, then we're more than happy to have a conversation along those lines. But we really want to say to those who maybe have felt that this is a barrier to them, even exploring Christianity, no, come on, come and hear more about Jesus, and let's go from there.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining us for our first ever Let's Talk podcast on relationships. But that's all we've got time for this time round.
Yeah, and if you have any further questions, feel free to email us on letstalkproclaimers.com or interact with us on our social media platforms.
But look out for further Let's Talk podcasts. We're going to be covering so many other things. If you've got any suggestions of things that you'd like us to talk about,